Hello and welcome to Chandoo.org. In this video, we are going to learn Excel pivot tables. This will be a comprehensive introduction and step-by-step tutorial on how to use pivot tables. In this video, we will be learning what is a pivot table, how to create pivots, understanding fields pane and pivot table ribbons, sorting and filtering the pivot table reports, changing the layout of your pivot reports, changing any calculations, and finally adding visualizations with pivot charts. Let's get into the sample file here. You can download a copy of this file with all the sample data and sample pivot tables from the video description below. For this purpose, I have sample data of 2019 sales information from a fictional company. We have for each month, for each salesperson in each region, for each product, how many customers they have sold that to, what is the total sales amount, and what is the profit or loss that they have generated. We do not have any loss as such, so everything is profit here. And this is not a lot of data, but quite a bit, like 434 items there, probably give or take a few. And for the sake of simplicity, I have already set up this data in an Excel table that is named as sales. It's not necessary that you should have your data in a table to make pivot table, but having it in a table means you can quickly change information or refresh the data if you want. To create a pivot table, just select any cell inside your data and then go to Insert Pivot Table. For certain types of data, Excel will also add this recommended pivot tables option in newer versions of Excel. Right now I am using Excel 365, which has the recommended pivot tables option. And if you are too lazy to try, you can give that a go and see what kind of recommendations Excel will make. Since we are assuming that you have no prior knowledge about pivot tables, let's go and click on this pivot table button. Now, when you create a pivot from an existing table, Excel will already type the name of the table. Here it is saying that you want the table pivot from sales table, and this is all we need. If you are creating from a range, you need to make sure that the address of the range is correct. So it would be B3 including the header and H434 or whatever. You could also see from this screen that you can use an existing table within the spreadsheet, or you can use an external data source. This is an extremely powerful option. Using this, you can connect to databases or some other types of sources and bring the data through that to create pivot tables. There is a third option called Use This Workbook's Data Model. Now, we do not have a data model in this workbook, that is why this is grayed out. But if you have multiple tables, or if you have built a data model through Power Query, then you could use that option to create a pivot table. That would be fairly advanced at this stage, so we will not talk about that. When you create a pivot table, it will automatically go to new worksheet. That is why the new worksheet option is selected. You could, at the same time when you are creating a pivot table, you can convert this to a data model by adding this data to the data model. Since we are not dealing with the data model capabilities, I will ignore that aspect and we will simply click OK. So to make a pivot table, all you have to do is select a cell, go to Insert Pivot Table, and then just simply click OK, and you will be on your way to creating very first pivot table. When you do this, Excel will insert a new sheet, set up a blank pivot table canvas for us, and it will also enable this side panel called Pivot Table Fields. This side panel is used to constructing that pivot table. Now that we are here, let's take a quick look at understanding what is a pivot table and why do you need one. Whenever you have data like this, you're always asking questions in the sense, like nobody is interested in a printout of all the 434 items. This is the data, but we are asking questions like what is the total sales of middle region in the January month or February month, or which product is selling best, is it fast car, rapid Jew, or super glue? So to answer such questions, we need to actually construct a report, and that can be done in a couple of different ways. You could write formulas, you could also use pivot tables. Pivot tables provide this extremely simple way to get the answer for your business questions from your raw data using a just drag and drop kind of a mechanism. So here we will construct our very first pivot table. We will look at how each of our salespersons are doing and what is the total amount they have generated. So since the focus is on salesperson and the net sales total, we will take salesman and then put that into row area. When you put whatever field you put in row area, one person or one item per row will be listed here. We have 4 salespeople, so all of them will go here one at a time, usually in the alphabetical order. And then this is the amount that we want to see. So we take the net sales and drag and drop to values area. Immediately, because net sales is a number, Excel will add up the number and then list the total sales by each salesperson. And you could see that this person has done 174,000, that person has done 179,000, and the overall total sales is almost $700,000. Right? So this is a very simple, very quick, and very easy pivot table. All it is doing is it is providing us a view of how much sales are happening by salesperson, and this is giving me that. So that's the sum of net sales. Likewise, if I want to see the number of customers they have served, you can also add that. So you can have one value field or multiple value fields. So now that we have a pivot table going, let's take a closer look at the entire screen here. This area is your pivot table, right? Whenever you select any field inside your pivot table, you are able to interact with that pivot table by changing the layout or adding more fields to it from the pivot table fields area on the left hand side or right hand side. This pivot table fields thing is a panel, but it is usually stuck to the right hand side of the screen. But if you don't like that, you can also drag this and kind of put it on top of your Excel screen and work with that. I usually just leave it where it is by leaving it on the right hand side, and it will list all the fields in your data that you are seeing. If you go back to the data, each column is a field. So that's what this is showing us here. Month is a field, salesman is a field, etc. And you can take the fields and you can add them to either row area or column area or values area. Usually we put all the numbers into the values area, and then the other items like salesman, region, product, these are the items that can go into row area or column area. Okay, so now that the pivot table is here, you can also see that whenever you are activating the pivot table by selecting any cell inside that, you will also see there are a couple of extra ribbons on the top. One is analyze ribbon, the other is design ribbon. These ribbons are collectively called as pivot table ribbons, and from analyze ribbon you can do some of the things that we were doing earlier by dragging and dropping, etc. And from design ribbon you can change the look or feel of this pivot table. For example, let's say you don't like this blue color. Let me just keep the ribbons on. You can go and change the pivot table style from that blue color to this orange colored theme or that yellow colored one. Likewise, you could also add banded rows so that there is like a extra lines added, or banded columns if you prefer those kind of things. Okay, so this is a very, very simple pivot table. Now let's take a closer look at the salespersons. I will remove the number of customers items, so we are only looking at sales. To remove an item from the pivot table, all you have to do is select that, drag and drop it outside. So this is how you do it. As soon as you move it out, there will be an X mark shown next to the cursor, and when you leave, that field is gone. There are a couple of other ways to do these things. For example, you want to add number of customers, you can also right click and then say add to values, and that would be added. Likewise, to unselect this, all you have to do is untick that and it's gone. Okay, so there are a few different ways to do that. So now that we are looking at salespersons, let us say you are interested in seeing the best performing salesperson on the top. The best performing one is the one with most sales. To do that, all you have to do is right click on the values, any value, and then go to sort largest to smallest. And now your pivot table is sorted in the descending order with the best salesperson on the top. So this is how you would sort a pivot table. Let's say this is for all the products in all the regions. What if I'm only interested in the middle region? I want to see who is my best performing salesperson or just their total sales in the middle region. Such operation is called filtering, and you can apply filters on pivot tables in a couple of different ways. One is you can add any filter into the filters area. This area is also called as a report filters or pivot table filters. So we can take a region and put that there. Right now we are looking at all regions. If I select this and click on middle, okay, then we are really looking at middle region. Notice that as soon as I've picked middle region, my report is calculated for only the sales happening within middle region, and then it is sorted again so that the best salesperson in the middle region, which is Joseph, listed on the top. So any sort order that you do is really dynamic. It sticks to the pivot table, and then as you change, it will automatically reapply the sorting. So this is one way of filtering by adding that to filters. I'll remove this, so we will go back to the way things are. The other way to add a filter is you can right click on the field and then add it as a slicer. Now a slicer is just like your report filter that is sitting on the top, but this is more visual. So all you have to do with a slicer is you can click on it and it will select that region. So we can select middle and then it says Joseph. If I select north, it will say Lawrence. West, it will say Matt, because the sorting is redone. To clear the filter away and go back to all the regions, just click on that clear filter button on the top and then you are back to the way things are. So this is how you can filter a pivot table in two different methods. One is a report filter, the other is slicers. My favorite method for filtering pivot tables is obviously slicers. I will explain why this is my favorite towards the end of this presentation. So that is how you can filter. Now let's say you looking at this sales figures and you're thinking, oh, this is all good, but you know what, this is dollars. It should be formatted like that. You might be tempted to select all of this and then apply the dollar formatting. And this, while this might provide the result that you want, it is incorrect way of looking at it. The correct way of doing this is right click on the number, go to value field settings. This is slightly annoying because this behavior requires multiple clicks, but this is the only way you can actually achieve this in a consistent manner. So now that we are looking at sum of net sales as a value field, you can click on number format here, and from there you can just say this should be currency with the 0 decimal points and click OK, and the formatting is applied consistently all the way through. Okay, and you can again do all the filtering, etc., and then this will still work. So this is how you can apply the formatting to the fields. You can just use the number format option from the value field settings. Let's say you are not interested in the sum of net sales. You are looking at average of net sales or average of profit. For example, this is the total net sales. I want to see what is the average number of customers they're helping. So I will add the number of customers. Because it is a number, it will automatically be summed up. But to change this calculation behavior, you can again right click, go to value field settings and do it from there, or you can simply use summarize values by option in the menu, and from here you can change this from sum to one of those other options. So here we will do it average, and it will say that on average this person is helping 8 customers, whereas that one is also 8 but 7.9. And again, once you do this, you may want to really apply value field settings and number format on this to do maybe 1 decimal point so that it will look like this. So this is how you can change the calculation and again apply the formatting so that it would look correctly. So that's how the pivot table setup is done. Now let's take a look at some of the more variations of pivot tables. We'll go back to the original data. We will insert another pivot table. You can choose the existing worksheet and put it on the sheet 4, but it doesn't really matter, so we will go and add this new one. This time let's take a look at total sales by region and product. So when you have such two items, you're essentially creating a two-dimensional pivot. And so from region and product, you can add that here. This will create a nested pivoting like this, middle and then fast car like that. And then we can say net sales, and it will give you what is happening by each region, within region, by product like that. So this kind of reporting is extremely useful from a business perspective. Most of the time you're looking at data like this and analyzing and working with this. Let's go and quickly apply the currency formatting first. That way we can read these numbers better. And now that is all good, let's say this is what is happening by region and product, and we like the information, but we find that this layout is slightly confusing. So you may want to change the layout of this report. To do that, select the pivot table cells and then go to design ribbon. Now, even if you have a pivot table in the worksheet, if you select outside, you won't be able to access those design ribbon or analyze ribbon. That's why you must select this to get to that ribbon. And from here, you can change the report layout to one of the different options. The default option is called as compact method, compact form, but you may want to try some of these other ones. My favorite is tabular form. This creates a two-level report like that, which will have region in its own column and product in its own column with the information and the subtotals added. Let's say you don't really like the subtotals. You could simply turn it off and then that will go away. You're only looking at individual items without the subtotal. Alternatively, you can also change the position of the subtotal. This will depend on what layout you're using. For example, with the tabular layout that we are using, you can only show the subtotal at the bottom. But with the compact layout, you have the choice of showing the subtotal either on the top or on the bottom of the group, like that. Let's switch back to the tabular form so that this is how it will look. Likewise, you can also add or remove the grand totals. For example, if you do this, there won't be any grand total row at the bottom, or you can add this there and it will be there. So this is a two-dimensional pivot report that shows two informations, but in the row area only. You can also change the layout of this pivot table by showing regions here and products across the screen. This is a very useful report. It will create a different structure like this so that you can read by product or by region and get the information. When you have such data like this, you are also looking at all the salesmen, but if you add a slicer by salesperson, you can then see what is happening by individual salesperson. A logical next step is, because there are so many numbers here, you may want to visualize this. One simple way to visualize pivot table data is simply go to pivot table analyze and click on pivot chart. Instantly you will go to one of these charts. You can select the charts, for example, change the layout. Not all charts can be selected with pivot table data, but we will just go with clustered column, which is a reasonable fit for this kind of data. And we will lay out that chart there. And now you could see that why slicers are my favorite way of filtering things, because with a slicer, not only I can see the information by region and by product, but I'm looking at Matt's data. I can change this to Joseph or Lawrence or Maria, or I can multi-select by clicking and dragging so that I can see what is happening by that. And this will create an instant dynamic chart for us that not only provides the information but also is easy to interact with. So that is how you can use pivot tables. I hope you found this information very useful. One last tip before I stop this, which is, let's say you have some new information. This data is up to December 2019, but imagine you have Jan 2020 data. I don't really have Jan 2020 data with me, but I'm just gonna cheat this by copying the information from Jan 2019 and pasting it at the bottom here. Okay, and for all these items, I'll simply say Jan 2020, and I'll press Ctrl Enter so that all of these cells will get the same date. So right now we have an extra month of information. To update the pivot tables, all you have to do is go to any pivot table. As long as they all come from the same data, you can just go to pivot table analyze and refresh the pivot tables. When you do this, automatically all the data is updated and you will have new information populated into the pivot tables. So the key thing to remember here is, while pivot tables are very useful, they're not directly linked to your data. That means if you change any information, none of your calculations are gonna get updated immediately. You must press the refresh button, only then that updation will happen. So that's one thing to keep in mind, and that is done by refreshing your pivot tables. So you could do that refresh from the pivot table ribbon or from the data ribbon and then clicking on that refresh button there. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found this introduction to pivot tables very useful. I'll talk to you again in another video where we are going to look at some of the advanced pivot table tricks and techniques. Thanks. Bye-bye.